أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية لأعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم شهر Ramadhan الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. With the barakat of the holy month of Ramadan, we get the opportunity to also look at the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. And since yesterday we started the brief commentary of Suratu l-Insan, which is surah number 76 of the Quran. It has two other names also, Suratu Dahr and also Surah Hal-Ata. All these three names come from the first ayat of this surah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began by saying that didn't there come a period of time for a human being where he was not even worth being mentioned, because he didn't exist. And as we talked about it last night, that everything was prepared for the human being, but the human being was created later on. And that is to give us a message that dunya is for us and we are not fit for this dunya. To continue with that tafsir, we'll go on to the second ayat tonight. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now, after talking about the insignificance of a human being, that there was a time when there were many things there but you were not there. Then he talks about the creation of the human being, where he says, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِن نُطْفَةٍ أَمْشَاجٍ نَبْتَلِيهِ فَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. We surely created the human being from a drop, mixed, changing him. Nabtalihi, one of the meanings is that changing him into different forms until we made him full human being with the capacity of hearing and seeing. Now, hearing and seeing are just being used as two important examples of senses, five senses that we have, but these are the most important ones, because when it comes to the issue of ilm, knowing things, as well as getting the hidayat and guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hearing and seeing are very important parts of it. When we look at this ayat, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically is saying that, remember that you are not even worth being mentioned. Now, whatever you see in this translation here, in form of the italics, this is what has been added just to make the meaning more clear. And so this is this part of the slide is translation of the same ayat with some explanatory remarks. We surely created the human being from a sperm drop mixed with ovum, changing him into various forms in the womb of the mother until we made him hearing and seeing. Now, after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically, although He began talking about the insignificance of a human being, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself, says that, you are my prime creation. You were nothing before, but when I created you, I take pride in you. You are Ashraf al-Makhluqat, the best of my creation. And the creation of a human being itself, and we are not talking about Adam as the first one, but we are talking about the process that Allah created after Adam and Hawa, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that even if you look at the process of the creation of human beings in general, you will see in it the reflection of Allah's power and wisdom. There are many, ayats where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the entity of one drop, which is the beginning of a human being, mixed with the ovum and then further developing. When we look at the ayat of Quran, we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after saying that He is changing the human being from one form to another during the pregnancy era, time period, that itself is a miracle, how things begin. Now there are two relevant verses I would like to mention here, relevant with this theme of a creation of the human being. There are actually many ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this, but two of them are very important. I wanted to share those with you. Number one, there is an ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَخْلُقُكُمْ فِي بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُمْ خَلْقًا مِّن بَعْدِ خَلْقٍ في ظلمات ثلاثة ذلكم الله ربكم له الملك لا إله إلا هو فعنا تصرفون. In this ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying He creates you in the wombs of your mothers. Number one. خلقا من بعد خلق. You go through different phases of change from beginning to the end. في ظلمات ثلاثة. In threefold darkness. When the child is in the womb of the mother, that is Allah your Lord. Realize that. Lahul mulk, the entire kingdom belongs to Him. La ilaha illa, there is no God but Him. Fa'anna tusrafun. Where are you, wandering here and there? Now when you look at this ayah, this is itself is one of the signs of the miracle of the Quran. When we look at this ayat for us, or even for those who lived 500 years ago, they just went through it, that yes, Allah is saying He created you in threefold darkness. What does it mean? It's only later on that science has become more aware about the development of a child in the womb of the mother. And this is where a study was actually done by somebody from UFT. Dr. Keith Moore, he was from the Department of Anatomy of University of Toronto, and he actually had the opportunity through some contacts in Saudi Arabia. When he went there, he was expert in embryology, and they actually put the verses of Quran to him in the literal meanings. They said, you are expert of this field, study them and give us your assessment. And it's very interesting that when he looked at the ayat of Quran, he ended up writing actually a research paper in 1986. And it's still, if you just search for his name on the website, in Google, you will be able to find that article. It must be somewhere there in one website or another. And the title was A Scientist's Interpretation of References of Embryology in the Quran. It's interesting that when he looked at this ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the development of a human being in the womb of the mother fi dhulamatin thalath, in threefold darkness, he was really surprised. The Quran, which came 1400 years ago, even if you are not a Muslim, you will say, okay, Muhammad wrote it. But the issue is that how did Muhammad know that? Because even science didn't know anything about that at that time. And so he was really amazed. He said that now we know that when Quran talks about threefold darkness, it's referring to the abdominal wall, the stomach itself, the belly of the mother, and then the womb, and then the membrane in which the child is developing. He says these are the three darknesses or three levels of protection that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. And he actually concludes that article by these words, which are very important for us. He says the interpretation of the verses in the Quran referring to human development would not have been possible in the 7th century AD when the Prophet lived, or even 100 years ago. We can interpret them now because the science of modern embryology affords us new understanding. And so this question comes up, is Quran the book written by Muhammad, or is Quran the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed on Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? He didn't go to school. There is no teacher who taught him anything. We basically call him unschooled person. Although some Muslims will say he was illiterate, we don't agree with that. There is a difference between not having a teacher and being illiterate in that sense. And so this is where we come to realize that this is one example, this ayat, that there are things in the Quran that modern science only came to know recently, in this century. He says even 100 years ago, we wouldn't know what does it mean. Only now we know that there are 3 levels of, kind of protection or shield or darkness, as the Quran uses this term. And this is where we come to realize that Quran is Kalamullah. It is not Kalam of Bashar. Revealed upon the Prophet till the end of this world, and as long as the science moves further, makes more, discovery of facts and not theories, they will come to realize that Quran is the Kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat alayhi. There is a kind of a batini tafsir of this also. I'll leave it out. This is not the appropriate time, but you can ask me later on during iftar time. What does 3 darkness mean? وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ صَلَالَةٍ مِنْ طِينٍ ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَاهُ نُطْفَةً فِي قَرَارٍ مَكِينٍ ثُمَّ خَلَقْنَا النُّطْفَةَ عَلَقًا فَخَلَقْنَا الْعَلَقَ مُضْغَةً فخلقنا المضغة عظاما فكسونا العظام لحما ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر فتبارك الله أحسن الخالقين. This is another ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this process of creation, development of a human being in the womb of the mother, where he begins by saying, certainly we created man from an extract of clay. This refers to Adam. And after that then we made him a drop of fluid in secure abode. And this is where nutfa, secure abode would be the raham and the womb. Then we created the drop of fluid. This is where, the ayat which we are discussing in Surah Insan, that Allah created the human being from his drop, and then He changed him in different form until he became seeing and hearing and seeing. And so we see that the stages of creation in the womb, after the issue of the drop of fluid, Allah says, then I turned it into clinging mass. And then we created the clinging mass into a fleshy tissue. Then we created the fleshy tissue as bones. ثُمَّ كَسَوْنَا الْعِظَامَ لَحْمًا. And then we clothed the bones with flesh. And when that physical, creation was completed at the age of 4 months or so, this is where now the body is in a way complete, and now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in the soul. And that is described by the ثُمَّ أَنْشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ. From beginning till that time when the flesh is put on the bones, different forms. But then when it reaches to completion, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells we produce him as another creature. Now he's become complete. And when he is complete, then even the Creator takes the pride. فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. So blessed So blessed is Allah, the best of creators. Now when we look at this, process, this is where we come to realize that, Quran has been very specific sometimes in making us realize that yes, we were not shay'an mafkura. We were not worth mentioning when we didn't exist. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I created you from one drop. And this is where you end up to become my ashraful makhluqat. And He takes pride in calling Himself ahsanul khaliqeen, the best of creators. It's important to realize that although we are the best of, the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ashraful makhluqat, but I think this first ayat, which we discussed last night, هل أتى على l-Insan دهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. That remember there was a time where you were not even worth mentioning. And even then your creation began. You became the best of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But remember your beginning, even in the creation process. It's just one drop. And it's considered to be very insignificant. And that reminder always should make us humble. Not only in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we worship Him and obey Him, it should even take away this arrogance and takabbur when we interact with one another. This realization, that's why we see that, for example, even our rituals, when we talk about namaz, one of the important things that we do, especially from the Shi'i point of view, you go into the lowest point in sajda, and you place your forehead, which is the most important part of your face. Your face is your identity. This is how people know one another. And you place that on the turbat. What is turbat? Turbat is earth, dust. This is where we are told that Adam, our father, was created from that. It's a lesson of humility. And this is where we have to realize that, remember the beginning and even remember the process of sajda. And this is where takabbur will not come even close to us. Let me end here with one hadith on this issue from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. It's very important sometimes to understand the Islamic laws that we have. Very simple issues. In the list of najasat, we have two items. There are certain things which are considered to be ritually impure, unclean, najis. And we have to stay away from it when we talk about food and drink and about our namaz. At namaz time, our body and our clothing should be clear of that. It doesn't mean that najasat is an evil thing. In that list of najasat, what you see one item there? Mani. Not the English one. Nutfa, that's a part of it. Just think about it. Beginning of a human being, the Sharia says, in the list of things which are ritually impure is that. And then what happens to us at the end? We become mayyit. Another item in that najasat is murdar, a dead body. Even the dead body of the most learned, the pious person on the earth, when this person dies, from the time of his death till the time he is given ghusl, at that duration we say his body is najis. If you touch that body, you also in a way become najis and you have to do ghusl masamayyit. The issue of mani or murdar or the mayyit is not that they are evil entities. Na'uzu billah. No. It's just sometimes we have been given certain rulings that we have to keep away from the najasat, as I said, in food and drink, and in about ibadat and about namaz, in our dress and our body. These rulings are there sometimes to teach us a lesson. This is what Amir al-Mu'mineen says. So remember these two items from the list of najasat. He says, Ajibtu li ibn Adam. This is Ali. He's saying, I am really surprised at Adam's son, children of Adam. Awwaluhu nutfa. The beginning of his creation is a sperm drop. Wa akhiruhu jifa. And his end is he becomes a corpse, a body. Wa huwa qa'imun baynahuma wi'a'an lil-gha'it. And between that beginning and the end, he is actually carrier of waste in his belly. ثُمَّ يَتَكَبَّرْ. Then Ali says, yet he is arrogant. All these rulings about najasat actually is connected to this issue. It's not that money. Money is the most precious thing. That's the beginning of the human being. A murdar who is mu'min, muttaqim, let's say mujtahid, alim, everything, is very much respected even in that state. They are not evil. But these rulings are there just to teach us. This is the way Amir al-Mu'mineen says, remember the beginning, remember the end. Probably it has been declared to be najis so that you do not behave with takabbur and arrogance. Salawat. One of the best ways of, getting rid of takabbur and ghurur is the issue of joining Jamaat Prayers. I've been asked to at least, talk about one mas'ala every evening, just to remind brothers and sisters, especially the sisters, about some of the rules of the Jamaat Prayers. And one of the important, let me connect with this theme, that one of the important ways of getting rid of this moral disease of arrogance and pride. Pride, in a sense, putting down somebody and thinking very great about, oneself. When we go for namaz jamaat, one of the important things is that there is no reserved spot for anyone. Imam of the masjid is exception to the rule. Okay? But even if another alim comes who is not the imam of the masjid, there is no reserved spot for that fellow. Somebody might have donated this whole masjid, let's say, entirely with his money, not even khums, let's say. Remember, khums is not ours, it's imam. But let's say his own personal donation he used to build a masjid. He says, I'll do that, but I want to have a condition that the first musalla behind the imam will be reserved for me. You can't, but this cannot be done. Sharia doesn't allow it. Even if a person comes every day on time before others and sits in a particular place every evening, they kind of become very comfortable with that musalla. Even people say, okay, this is his place, okay, we'll leave him, give him room. If others give you room, that's okay. Suppose one day you came late and yours, favorite spot was already occupied by somebody else. Can you say, please move, this is my place? Moving that other person there is itself is haram, it's a sin. It wouldn't have an impact on his namaz, but it is still haram. This is where we come to realize that when you come to masjid, namaz jamaat is emphasized in Islam because this is where we learn that in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it doesn't matter whether you are Sayyid or Shaykh, Arab or Ajam, white or black, rich or poor, president or as normal, citizen. this doesn't count in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is the lesson of humility that we can learn from namaz al-Jamaat. This is just connecting to the theme that we discussed in the Tafsir. But just one important mas'ala about the rules of Jamaat. Salawat. We have the Imam who leads the prayer, the leader of the Jamaat. Then everyone else becomes ma'moom, those who are following the Jamaat there. And when it comes to this issue of Imam and ma'moom, even the wordings, the designation shows that, okay, in the congregational prayer, आपको follow करना है Imam को. Otherwise you wouldn't be ma'moom. What do you follow? There are two things. One is amal, actions, and the other is the zikr. When it comes to the zikr, we'll, inshallah, talk about it tomorrow. A very important thing in namaz al-Jamaat is that, to maintain that format of Jamaat and the meaning of Jamaat, where there is an imam who is leading the prayer and others are ma'mumeen following. When it comes to actions, नमाज के अमल, तकबीर की बात है, क़याम की बात है, रुकू में जाने की बात है, getting up from the ruku, going into sajda, getting up from the sajda. All these actions, the ma'moom has to follow the imam. If the ma'moom goes ahead of the imam intentionally, then his Jamaat prayer becomes batil. He will then have to continue the namaz as furada. So he will be missing out the sawab of Jamaat. Provided this is done intentionally. Especially those who stand in the first row. They have to be more careful. I normally don't see. I'm not talking about here. I'm talking about the center where I'm normally. People tell me, you don't know, we see from behind. Well, if people do that habitually, that's a different thing. Although it's a bad habit, they should learn. But if they do it intentionally, then their Jama'at becomes batil, it changes into furada. So it's very important that when it comes to takbir, you follow after the imam. When it comes to the ruku, imam ke baad aap jaiye ruku mein. When it comes to getting up from the ruku, you have to get up after the imam as reason for the getting up of the ruku. Sajda issue is the same. To the extent that, for example, ruku is known as rukun, which means that if you do the rukun, intentionally double, then your namaz becomes batil. But in the case of namaz al-Jamaat, if somebody gets up from ruku thinking that the imam has gotten up, but then he realizes that no, imam is still in ruku, you are required to go back to ruku, and that does not harm your namaz. It doesn't become batil because you went into ruku the second time lil mutabi'ah, in order to follow the imam. So this is a very important thing as far as actions are concerned. जहाँ तक अमल की बात है, मामून को इमाम की पैरवी करनी चाहिए, उससे पहल न करे, आगे न बढ़े. रब्बना आतिना फिद दुनिया हसनतन व फिल आखिरति हसना व क़िना अज़ाबन्नार बिरहमतिका या अरहमर राहिमीन.